Karl Marx, an intimate biography by Saul Padover. So this is the third biography of Marx I've read so far. I read previously Karl Marx, A Life by Francis Wheen, and Karl Marx, His Life and Environment by Isaiah Berlin, and I've reviewed them both on this channel. Yeah, I find Marx fascinating. One of the reasons I find him so fascinating is because we know so little about him. When I say we, I mean like the general public. Everybody knows he's one of the most influential historical figures, had a huge impact on the 19th century, had a huge impact on the 20th century, it's very hard to find decent biographies of him, at least kind of in your local bookstore. I mean, they are there tucked away in the corners of your library and stuff like that. But yeah, so I've just been interested to just know more details about this man who had such a big historical impact. I do have to confess, though, that I am not philosophically gifted. I'm very stupid when it comes to philosophy. I can't understand German Hegelianism or the different schools of Hegel or any of this type of thing. My interest in biography is primarily narrative. Like, I like to, the details of somebody's life. Now, you could argue that this is kind of a stupid way to approach Karl Marx. After all, he is a philosopher. And you may be right, fair enough. But if you, like me, are more interested in biography than in philosophy, then I recommend this biography. This biography, out of the three I read, was the one that was primarily focused just on Karl Marx's life and didn't kind of tax the reader with a lot of kind of digressions into the philosophical thought of the time or German Hegelianism or any of that kind of stuff. Some of Marx's philosophical works are mentioned in this book, but very little understanding is asked of the reader. My only major complaint, well, a couple complaints. One is it wasn't as comprehensive as I was hoping it would be. I mean, it did focus kind of all on biography and very little on philosophy, but there were some interesting biographical details, events in Marx's life, that I had picked up from the previous two biographies that, to my surprise, were either kind of not mentioned in this one, or they were mentioned but not elaborated on all that much at all. Now, it could be because I picked up the abridged edition. Ordinarily, I try and avoid abridged editions, but I ordered this through Amazon, and I didn't realize it was an abridged edition until I got it. So, I think I've got the abridged edition. The other kind of complaint is that the style of the book is a little bit dry. It's kind of like reading a textbook. Now, to its credit, it is very easy to understand, which does kind of make for a fast read. But you do kind of sense that Saul Padover is not really having a lot of fun here, that he's just kind of dutifully kind of hitting the major points. The other two authors I mentioned seemed like they were having a lot of fun with some of the quirkiness of Marx's life or the paradoxes of Marx's life. Here it's just kind of a much more by the numbers. However, the book does give a clear outline of most of the events in Marx's life. I thought it did a very good job, for example, of explaining Marx's connection to the 1848 revolutions, which, as it turns out, Marx's connection was very limited. But this book did a very good job of just kind of explaining what that limited connection was. The book is largely chronological, going kind of through the events in Marx's life in the order they happened, except for the last 20 years in England, which are divided into chapters by subject. So here the chronology gets kind of abandoned, and we have got one chapter on Das Kapital, one chapter on the rise and fall of the First International, and one chapter on the Paris Commune. Now, it's a little bit hard to divide it up into sections like this because in reality, all these subjects were intertwined. For example, one of the reasons Marx got so little done on Das Kapital and why he never got around to finishing the subsequent volumes was because of his involvement in the First Communist International, or the First Working Men's International. And the event that thrust the First International into the spotlight was the Paris Commune. So it's very hard to kind of disentangle these events from each other. I wouldn't go so far as to say it gets confusing, because again, Saul Padover's style is very clear. So he never kind of loses me. I never got confused as to what's happening. But it does make the book lose some of its forward momentum narratively. It also makes many of the events in Marx's story anticlimactic. For instance, there's a chapter on Marx's children in which Padover mentions the death of Marx and Engels, but then later he goes back and retells how they died. So, I mean, obviously there are no spoilers here. We know they died. But I think when you read a good biography, it helps to kind of keep the forward momentum of the story, if you kind of have a sense of events propelling each other. Quibbles aside, though, this is a very concise, clear, biographically focused, and easy to read introduction to the life of Karl Marx. It's a great starting point for anyone who wants to learn more.